and welcome to the Fiber Tales podcast. My name is Lærke, and this is a podcast about knitting, about knitwear design. I work as a knitwear designer, so I like to share all the process, and I also sometimes share about our life here. I live on a small island in Denmark called Fyn, with my partner and 2 small children. We also have 2 cats. Sometimes they come and join me during the podcast. And yeah, it's been a little while since I last spoke. I feel like this winter is just dragging along, and it's been really hard to feel motivated lately to record. At least I haven't been knitting so much. Well, that's not true. The last week I've been knitting, but before that there was a little bit of a break because I was working a lot on patterns, and I had to wait for some yarn to come in for new design. So I just had a little bit of a low period where I didn't knit so much, but I was working on my Perikon sweater that I showed in the last episodes. That one is right now being tested, and I think it will be ready to be released around mid-March, so it's not so long, maybe a week, maybe 2. I normally don't put a deadline if I don't have to. That's very strict, because that way I just don't feel too much pressure to get things done, and I know they're gonna get done properly, and if there's any little changes that needs to happen in the end, I don't have to rush them. So so I've been working on that one. I've been working on a shawl design that I had to try to write the pattern for, and it was horrible because I worked on I can show you, it's just right behind me. Sometimes it's probably more fun to see what I'm talking about. I already showed it here on the podcast before. These are little sneak peeks. It's such a beautiful drape, this one, and little elements of flowers and leaves. Maybe you can see them here. And yes, I knit this in the fall when I was in Italy. I was knitting on it in Italy. I finished it when I got home. And unfortunately, since I was on holiday, I was a little loose with the pattern writing. I just took some notes, like how many stitches I cast on with, and some of the things I thought were more important, but when I sat down to write the pattern, there were just a lot of things not working out according to what I thought they should, or what I was reading. I was trying to read my knitting, and sometimes that can be hard. There's some of the stitches here that are a little bit tricky, since you increase and decrease while you're doing them, and it just makes things... Yeah, it just gave me a bit of a headache, but I've sent it off to my tech editor, and she's sending me emails back asking different questions, but once she understands all the details, she will give it a good look, and then I can start testing on that one as well. So that means I will have 2 tests going, and that's what I would like to have at all times, just so I can have patterns coming out. But sometimes it's just not how it works. I also work as a photographer, so during summer months I'm more busy with photography, and I have less time for pattern writing. Other than the pattern writing and working on tests and new patterns, I have been busy with gardening. We've been doing a lot of gardening because this is the time of year when just before all the plants start to grow. So I started maybe a month ago, like cleaning out areas. We bought this house a year ago. Well, in May it's 1 year, and that means there are a lot of work to do in the garden. And I really like it, so I don't mind, but it's just been a lot of cleaning out the garden and getting things ready, and I can already see now that the little nettles are coming up and so on in some areas. So we did it in the right time, and now the plan is to, those areas that we cleaned out, we want to have grass growing, so we just have to keep cutting the grass. And yeah, it's just been really nice to start being more outside, even if it's been really cold, and today's just a few degrees. It's sunny, but it's just a few degrees, so it's quite cold, but I hope at the end of March maybe it will be warmer. I'm really longing for spring. And I also wanted to say, from my last episode, I just wanted to say a big thank you for all your lovely messages and comments on my engagement. It was really nice. If you haven't watched, go watch the video, and I explain how it all went on. But it was just really nice to have so many sweet and positive comments and well wishes and so on. So thank you so much for that. I think I will get into something I got in the mail. So I got this big bag of yarn. I ordered some yarn. I ordered 2 sweaters quantities from Wooldreamers. They have beautiful yarn. And I didn't say what I'm going to talk about in this episode, so maybe I should put it in here. I want to talk about a design I've been working on, and since I'm using yarn from Wooldreamers, I thought it was a nice excuse to talk about one of my, at the moment, favorite yarn brands. This is not sponsored or gifted or anything. This is yarn I buy with my own money, but I really like the yarn. And I thought it was, I asked on Instagram if you have any ideas, if you had any ideas for topics, and some asked me about talking about yarn brands and so on. So I thought it would be a good excuse. So I'm going to show you a little bit what I got, talk about the design, and then go more into depth about the yarn, the different yarns I've tried from this brand. I haven't tried them all. So in this order, I got 4 skeins of this one, which is their Dehesa de Barrera. And it's a merino, 100% Spanish merino, and this one is in a very beautiful, what is the colorway called? It's it's not the white, it's called 1309. I will put it on the screen. It's a very beautiful, let me get this a bit closer. It's a very beautiful, like warm neutral, but not too yellow. It's a little bit like marzipan or something. And I got 4 skeins of this. I already ordered a skein in a previous package just to see if I liked it. And so I already have one. I don't know if it's the same dye lot because it didn't have dye lots on the labels at that point. And probably it's not the same since some time has passed. But I think I can get away with using it maybe on the ribbing if I need to. So I have 5 skeins in total. But one of them is unfortunately not from the same dye lot. It's just really beautiful yarn. I think it's so squishy. It's very squishy, and I just really like this color. I always look for creamier whites, but not with the yellow, very yellow, creamy white, and that is sometimes what you get when you get natural wool colors. I also got in this order, let's see if I can pull it up. I hope the wrinkling is not too annoying. I also got some of this, and this is the La Rinconada colorway, and not colorway. It's a different base, so they are both, I think, DK weight. This one is 230 grams, meters per 100 grams, and this one is 240. So this one is a little bit longer, but they are very similar, but this one is much more smooth and this one is more rustic. And it is in the green, dark green colorway, and I really like that they dye on different base colors. So this one is dyed on a dark yarn. It's also merino. I'm pretty sure it's the colorway called tierra, which means land or ground. Yeah, it's also 100% Spanish merino, but this one is more rustic and has a little bit more like a little bit of a tweedy effect. So I got a sweater's quantity in this one as well. I ordered 4 skeins, and I had the same problem that I previously ordered 1 skein of this one to test it out, and it didn't have a colorway on. This one has a colorway that you can see here, but it's added like later, and mine doesn't have anything from the previous, so I couldn't even ask them if they had more from the same dye lot. So sometimes this is what happens when you order from small companies. But I will get back to the yarn a little bit more and the properties. I did a swatch with the first skein that I had, and this is the swatch. I have it here. This swatch is actually a pocket, so I decided to make a swatch that could be used as a pocket, but since I figured out that it's maybe not the same colorway or dye lot, I am not sure I'm going to use it, but then I can just keep it as a pretty swatch. I played with some cables, some bubbles, and some elements that are, some of them are more traditional cable elements, and some of them are a little bit different. And I want to make a cardigan with pockets, like very oversized, a little bit like this one. By the way, this is my Perikon Sweater that I released some years ago, and it's just very cozy and has a little bit of a spring vibe, I feel, because it's a bit more cropped and light rosy colored, but it is very warm, so it's perfect for today. I was afraid I would be cold if I was not wearing a big jumper. Yeah, sorry, all over the place, but this is how it sometimes goes when I'm recording. But I was talking about the design I'm working on, and now it's on the needle, so it's a bit scrunched up, as well as the how you call it, the cables, they kind of pull on the fabric and they will relax a bit once I block it. As you can see, if I show you here how much these are kind of pulling together, and here it's just nice and flat and doesn't have that tendency to scrunch up on itself. But yeah, I have, this is the back of the cardigan that I'm working on. It will just be a little bit wider once it's been blocked, and I'm trying out the construction that I talked about in one of my last episodes, that I've been curious about this construction where you begin in the back and you have slanted shoulders, but then the front of the shoulder will kind of, you leave the seam on the back. I think it's called, what was it, English tailored construction, something shoulder construction. I just thought it would be fun to try out. It looks like it's a very, I find it very attractive, but it also looks like it will be very comfortable to wear. So this is how far I've gotten. This is what I have left of the first skein. So as you can see, I almost managed to squeeze out a full back with one skein. I will need some more, and then the ribbing. I'm knitting this in pieces. I actually thought about working in the round under the armholes, but I decided against it because for two reasons. The first reason is you're still knitting flat, so it would just give you a lot more fabric to be working on. So I didn't think it was necessary to join the fronts under the arms, and you could do that. But the other reason is when you don't decide on the armholes, how am I supposed to say that? When you wait on deciding on the armholes, you can add in different sizes of armholes. So you can try it on, see how deep you would like the armholes, and then pick. I try to sometimes make my patterns so you can mix different arm sizes with different body sizes, meaning you can go for smaller arm if you want it more fitted, you can go for a wider arm if you want it looser and with more ease. And when you have a garment that is stitched up in the sides, you have a lot of freedom to decide on that afterwards. You can try it on. So the plan is to knit the back and then the two front panels, and then I will knit the arms, and then I can try it on and figure out how deep I want the armholes to be. So I think this way it makes it a lot more flexible for people, and you would anyways, I don't mind seaming, but if you don't like seaming, you could knit it as a big flat piece and seam less, but there will always be, no, then there wouldn't be any seaming. So you could do, I can write, maybe I'm gonna write both options, but generally I just like having options to customize your knitting. I think that's one of the great parts about making your own garments. It's that you can always customize, you can decide if you want it longer or shorter. I'm not that tall, so when I write my patterns, I write it based on my body. I'm a size small on the top and a size large on the bottom, so I have a big range of sizes, and big range, but I go between sizes, which can be a little bit complicated. Now I'm mostly writing garments, patterns for garments or shawls, so it's not really important what I am lower in my body, but I sometimes find that people say that they want them longer, and then you just knit them longer. Of course, you will have to take your hip size into consideration if you make it past your hips. But but I think it's nice that you can customize your own things, and I really like the fabric that this is giving me. It's very squishy. Again, this Spanish merino is not very soft, but it's not prickly for me at all. It's just very easy to wear and very squishy. So I can't wait to block this and see how it looks. I think I knit this maybe twice with a lot of ripping back, and that's just what happens sometimes. I had to rip back a few times to get everything right, but once I got it all right, it's not hard to do at all, and I love doing more traditional cables. I think they're beautiful, and especially in the darker yarn, you can still see them more than the big cables than you could if it was a small stitch pattern. And this color is just so beautiful. I really like the, I think they're very close. I think this one is maybe, so this was the sample I made first, and I'm aware it might look very dark on camera. And this is the yarn I got now, and I think this one might be just a little bit greener, but I'll have to see after I wash it maybe how different they look. And if I can use it, then I will use it. If I run out of yarn, I think I will just try to add in the last skein I have in the ribbing. I think that's the easiest place to kind of hide it, because there's a different in texture, so it will naturally not be very visible. Or I could do it on the pockets, but then it has to be more close. The match has to be quite close. So yeah. So other than this, I haven't been knitting on much, but I did knit a pair of mitts for my daughter. She's using them every day, so I cannot show them to you. She's at school right now, and she did bring them with her, but I can put a picture. They are just knit out of leftover sock yarn I had from previous projects, and I just kind of freestyled the pattern. I used a pair of socks that I knit for her for Christmas, so if you saw that episode, and I just put the sock on her hand and I kind of pinched it, not too tight, but, and then I counted from the socks how many stitches I thought would be fitting for her hand, and then that's what I cast on. So that's a little tip if you are working on something else. And afterwards, I thought I could have done the same for her socks. I asked on Instagram how many socks people would cast on for kids, but I could just have put a pair of my socks on her and kind of pinched them at the side and counted how many stitches I would need. So sometimes you just have to make it easy for yourself. And I just made a pair of mitts. They're very easy to make. They're just a tube, and you just increase for the thumb. I've designed mitts in the past, so it was, excuse me, there was a little air coming up. I'm drinking tea, so it makes me a little bubbly. You just kind of increase on one side to make the thumb. And it's quite simple once you've tried a pair of mitts. So, but it was just nice to make something for her that she really wanted to have and to use up some leftovers. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Wooldreamers. It's a brand I discovered, I think last year. They are a Spanish yarn brand that makes yarn from local sheep breeds, I think mainly merino. I haven't tried all of their different yarn bases, but I have tried a few, so I thought it would be fun to talk about them. It's pretty much been all I've been talking about this whole episode. I just keep coming back to order more because I think it just has a lot of the qualities that I really like in yarn, and I think they have some beautiful colors as well. So I think I started using them when I designed my Gro hat. I designed that last year before Christmas. It came out before Christmas. And for this one, I used the same, the Dehesa la Rinconada Dehesa. I actually don't know how you say that in Spanish. You don't pronounce the H. So, this one. And this is in the lighter colorway. So that's what I have left. Oh, there's a hair. There's always a hair. I'm so... With me and the cats and everyone else, there's always a hair. The ball. Oh well, it's the same one that you see in the hat. It's very beautiful. I can get a little bit closer. It's a very beautiful light, warm gray color with a lot of little I don't know if you can tell, but it has little specks of darker browns in it, and I just think it is very squishy and nice, and it just has a beautiful stitch definition, but it's not so smooth, so it still has a lot of character. It's definitely more of a rustic yarn, but it still is not itchy for me at all. It's very dry and very bouncy, and that's what you get with merino. It has this beautiful bounce. Let me see if I can get this game here. Okay, so just to show you the strand here, it's I don't know if you can tell if it wants to focus, but it just has this very beautiful bounce, and it's not too tightly spun. It's a woolen spun yarn. And if you compare it to this one, that is the other one that I showed you previously, the Barrera yarn, this one is much more smooth. It reminds me a lot of my first hat pattern I designed. I think it was my first pattern on Ravelry. It was knit in called, I will put the name, I can't remember, but they have a very similar type of yarn. And this one is more smooth, more, yeah, it just has less character, but it's still very beautiful. I just remembered that I have some color cards, so this is very organized. But here you can see actually the different colors that come in La Rinconada. So this is the one with a little more texture, and as you can see here, you have the little color of the sheep, which I think is brilliant. So the light sheep and then all the way to the dark sheep, and they dye on these different colors. So if you look at the green, that is the one I got, you can see that the light green is dyed on white wool, and then you get into, this is the one I picked, that is the more dark and muddy. I also really love, I love all of the ones dyed on the dark ones. I love this very mauvey, like Bordeaux maroon kind of color here, and then there's also a more like it goes from mustard into this kind of, I don't know, warm golden brown color, and you also have the natural colors on the top. And the one I used for the hat is this one, so the second lightest one, and I just think it's really a really nice way to make the colors. It gets them a lot of depth, especially when you use the darker yarn. I really love that. So this is one of my favorites. I keep coming back to it, and I think all the colors are beautiful. So yeah, and I also have a swatch card from the other one. So this one, Barrera, and this one has, the colors are more, they're more smooth, the yarn is more smooth, the colors are all dyed, I think, on white, so it just, they show up very clear and very true to color. There's less depth. The one I got is this one, so it's the one called Queso Curado, which is kind of funny. Is it one? Wait, 1, 2, 3. Yes, it must be Queso Curado, which means cured cheese. So, but yeah, it's like a nice sheep cheese or something like that. They're also very beautiful colors, but more clear, and I always tend to gravitate towards those colors with a lot more life, like you have in this one. Then I have one more shade card that I don't know what it's from. It must be one of the other bases, but I can't, and they have a lot of colors for this one, but it's not one of the ones I have, and it doesn't say the name, so I don't know which one it is, but they do have other bases that I would like to try to order, but right now I have enough for the next while. Then I have one more type of yarn from them that I really love. It's their unspun. It's called Manchelopis. It's a beautiful unspun yarn that comes in plates. It's also Spanish merino. It's very bouncy and soft. Of course, it's not spun. I talk more about this in some of the previous episodes as well, about how the the plait has been wound, which gives me a little bit of a headache because the strands are going two together. So if you're not working two at the time, two strands together, it is a little bit annoying, but it's all worth it. And I think this yarn is beautiful. This yarn also comes in a few colorways. So I use this one, the second lightest. You can see there's a trend. I always like the one that's not the white, but just has a little more life. And they go into the different browns, and then they have a few colorways. This is from last year. I don't know if they added more colorways since then. They just have a few colorways in this one. And the plait is really beautiful. This I have one plait left, and then I have some smaller ones from when I knit my Perikon sweater. That's the one I mentioned. I'm piling yarn up everywhere around me. This is the one that I'm having tested right now. It's my Perikon sweater, and this one is knit in Manchelopis together with a strand of silk mohair from this one was from Knitting for Olive. So when you hold it together, it becomes a little more strong. The silk mohair adds a little bit of strength, and it makes it a little bit easier to work with. So definitely one thing that you have to is adjust your tension a little bit when you work with unspun. If you hold two strands together, it's a little stronger, but I find that when you work it together with silk mohair, it just makes it a lot easier to deal with because you can kind of pull more in the yarn. So yeah, these are the three types of bases that I've tried from this brand, and so far I really love it. The hat, I've been wearing it a ton and it's held up beautifully. There's pretty much no wear on it, and yeah, I've worn it for 2 winters now, so that should tell you something. It holds the shape really nicely. It doesn't peel a lot, so I'm really happy with this. Now I do find pilling happens more with garments when you have wear and so on, but I'm really happy with this one. This sweater I haven't worn yet so much because I still have to take pictures of it, and it's a new design, but I've been told that it wears beautifully. I asked on Instagram if anyone had experience with this, how it would wear, because it is an unspun, and the more you spin the yarn and twist it, the stronger it should be. But I always find when you have unspun, the moment you knit it up, those kind of very fragile properties, they disappear because it turns into a fabric that is much stronger. So I haven't experienced anything. I haven't tried this one yet. I haven't knit anything in this one yet. So I think I did a swatch one time, but I will get back. And I still don't know what exactly to make with it. So the idea was a little bit to make 2 versions of this one. But I might not do it. Let's see how I feel once I'm done with it. So I can come back to the yarn brand later on if I have more to add, and if I have any opinions on wear and on their other bases, then I might come back. So, but a dream of me is to one day visit their headquarters of their base. They are based in Spain, and that would be really lovely to see where the sheeps are from. And they have an Instagram account where they show a lot of the process, like the sheep farmers, shepherds, I guess they're called shepherds, and how, the story behind the yarn. So that's really lovely to follow along with. And I think they always have subtitles, so even if you don't speak Spanish, you can definitely follow what they're saying. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about technique, because that was also one of the things that was suggested to me, and I thought it was interesting because it's something I'm getting much better at, is deciding what techniques to use when I design something. For example, it's very popular right now to use tubular. When you have ribbing, you use a tubular bind off or cast on, and this is an example of a garment where I decided not to do that, even if I really like how it looks. I decided to just do a old school, how you call that, regular bind off. I was going to say long tail, but that's a cast on. I can't remember right now, but just a normal bind off. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the techniques I use with different yarns and why I pick those techniques. Let me just have some tea first. Okay, so for example, here you can see this is the hat. Now I have just unfolded it. Let me fold it again. On this hat I used a tubular cast on. So you cast on it that way. And I did that because I think it has a very nice stretch and it has a very pretty finish. It looks pretty much like a store-bought sweater, or which I don't always think is a compliment, but it just has this very clean, beautiful finish. It looks the same from both sides. A tubular bind off is not that hard to master, so in case you're nervous about it, it's really not that hard. You can do it in different ways, like a provisional cast on as well gives you the same effect. You can achieve the same effect with as the tubular cast on. But for example, for this one, I decided not to use a tubular cast on for two reasons. Well, the cast on I could have done, but I decided not to because this is the neckline and I wanted to have some structure. It still is flexible, but it's much more structured. This is just a long tail cast on than when you do a tubular cast on. And for the neckline, I didn't want it to grow too big. This is already a little bit on the bigger side for a neckline or neck opening. So I really wanted to keep the cast on with a little more strength. It's just not so flexible. It keeps the shape better. And this is something I have, maybe in the past I would have gone for tubular cast on just because it's pretty, but I try to also think a lot about what are you going to use it for. And for this one, I decided to, I'm too far away from the camera, but it's just because I like to have a little more of the background with me. For this one, I decided to bind off using just a normal bind off, both on the hem at the bottom and at the sleeves. And there are two reasons for that. The main reason is that when you work with an unspun, it's just very fragile. So when you have the strand, it's so easy that it breaks. When you're sewing, it just tends to break a lot. Okay, I was just interrupted for a moment now. I'm not quite sure where I ended the last one, so I'm just going to try to keep talking and hopefully I'm not somewhere repeating myself too much. But I find that it looks very neat and pretty to do a normal bind off. I did this one in ribbing, so it's not necessarily that you have to do a tubular bind off if it doesn't work with the yarn or it doesn't work with what you're looking for. I think there are many pretty ways to bind off and cast on. I haven't tried all of them, not even close to it. I have a few ones I stick to. I mainly do long tail. Sometimes I do a German twisted. I don't do that so much anymore. Then I many times do a tubular, and then I also have another one that I really like to use, and that is one I used on the shawl, and that is the cable cast on. So because the shawl is knit from the bottom up, it's so drapey and slippery. This one is knit from the bottom up. Let me get closer so you can see the edge a little bit better maybe. But this one is knit from the bottom up, and so you have to cast on a lot of stitches. And I find sometimes, I know there are techniques when you do a long tail cast on to cast on a lot of stitches, but I find that it's just too overwhelming to try to figure out the length of the tail and so on. So for this one, I just did a cable cast on, and a cable cast on is very easy because you have, you don't have a tail that you have to worry about. So you just keep using the working yarn to cast on more stitches, and then that way it's much easier. So if you're casting on a lot of stitches, let's say on the bottom of a garment, I would go for cable cast on in case you don't want to be bothered with all the stitches. And it works really well for bottom up shawls. I used it also on my Manchelopis shawl. That one has little picots. So when you have the little picots, it's a little bit different, but it's the same concept. So yeah, it's I will always pick the technique that I think works the best for the project. Sometimes with necklines, I prefer having it more flexible. If it's very tight, I would go for a tubular cast on, or as I did on this one, which is the Perikon sweater, I have a folded, it's a folded hem, so it didn't matter so much what I used, and I think I just used a long tail cast on, but definitely you have to kind of pay attention. I always try to pick the technique that I think looks the nicest and works the best for what I am looking for. The same if you're working on socks, you want a very stretchy bind off on the cuff or cast on, depending on which direction you're working. Normally I would do, for socks I still normally do like a twisted German, but sometimes if I'm feeling fancy I will do the tubular cast on. I just think it's a little bit fiddly when you're on the really small needles, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it. My only issue with the tubular cast on is when you are joining in the round. I find sometimes the stitches can very easily slip, especially if the pearl stitch at the end kind of slip off the needle, so it can be a little bit annoying. But I think it's worth it. And then I think to myself, okay, what's the worst that happens is I have to cast, rip it back and cast on again. That's one of the things that sometimes I just have to remind myself nothing happens. If it goes wrong, I'm just gonna do it again. But when you have a lot of stitches, it can be very annoying, and that's why I really like the cable cast on when you are doing a long, many stitches, because that way it's just very easy and it feels more like crochet. So if you're doing a long chain of crochet. I think I talked enough about knitting, about technique. If there's anything you would like to know about technique and my thoughts about something now, I just talked a little bit about cast on and bind off and a little bit about yarn. If there are any yarn brands you have seen me use and you would like for me to talk about, or techniques, feel free to mention them. And it's really nice for me to have some topics to talk about, because I don't always manage to knit that much, and I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to knitting. I also want to mention that I'm very happy every time someone comments or gives my videos likes. It's really nice for me, because that way I don't feel like we're having conversations and I'm not just talking to the camera, but also it just helps my videos to reach more people and it makes it a little more fun. I also really like when you interact on Instagram, so you can find me there. I'm Fiber Tales. I have fluff on my nose. I'm Fiber Tales everywhere, and I'm probably most active on Instagram. You can also find me at Ravelry. I don't use the Ravelry message system, and I haven't been using my the forum system on Ravelry for a long time. So in case you have any questions for me, that is just casual questions, reach me on Instagram. And if you have questions about patterns, like pattern support, please send me an email. There's always an email in the pattern, and that's where you catch me the easiest, all the fluff. And yeah, I just wanted to wish you a very nice weekend. I think this will be out tomorrow and it's Friday, so you will have it in time for the weekend. And I will talk to you all soon, I hope. Bye.